Good morning. Welcome to day 6. Today is all about sunflowers. Before I get started, I just have some exciting news. We had many requests, especially from my international students, to have our videos put on YouTube. So as of this morning, we're uploading all the videos onto our YouTube channel, which is Sue Spargo Folk Art Quilts. Please follow and subscribe. Today we will be working with House of Embroidery thread, both 8, 5 and size 3. Well, thank you for all your questions. Every day I'll try and answer a few of them. So the first question was about length of thread, which made me think I probably should tell you a lot more things about needle and thread. So I typically use an 18-inch length of thread. The only time I'd use a 12-inch would be if I'm using a thread that's more delicate or it twists a little bit more, but generally it's 18 inches. So I thought I would share some of tools of the trade when it comes to thread. So most of our threads are on spools, but not always. But when you have a thread that's on a spool, you are going to thread the needle on the end that comes off the spool, and where you cut is where you knot. So a couple of other things about threading. I thread needle to thread and not thread to needle. So by doing that, it makes it much easier to thread the finest thread in the finest needle. So I hold my thread in my left hand between my thumb and my index finger, and you can see right there's just a tiny little bit of the red thread showing. And I line up the eye of the needle. I then squeeze my fingers together and push the thread onto the needle like that. So it's much, much easier to thread very fine needles in fine threads, especially when it comes to the beading thread in a finer needle. You are going to then cut your thread, and where you cut your thread is where you knot. And I use a quilter's knot. So to do that, I'm going to make a circle with my thread like this, and I'm going to wrap into the circle. So I'm going to wrap around my needle, normally about 3 times. If I'm using a fine thread and I want a bigger knot, I'm just going to wrap a few more times. I'm going to hold the wraps and pull my needle through like this, and I will get a nice knot at the end. So I use a quilter's knot for every single thread, whether it's applique thread, embroidery thread, wool thread. That is how I will end up with the knot on the end. And now a few other tips is that when you're threading a needle, you never lick your thread. So never, 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 because the more you lick it, the more it expands, and it makes it harder to actually thread a needle. And pearl cotton actually becomes fairly limp, that it's just about impossible to thread the needle. The other thing is you lick your needle and not your thread. So when you lick your needle, it causes a sort of a capillary reaction in order to thread it much easier. Another tip is that eyes of needles are punched. So in other words, when they make them, they punch it. So one side of the needle is actually easier to thread than the other. So if you're really struggling, turn your needle around and try and thread it the other way. So I hope that gives you a little bit more information about how to get started and how to thread your needle. The other thing is that I was asked was, how do you end off a thread? So there's 2 ways I end a thread off. Normally I'm working around applique, so I have 2 layers of fabric. I'd have applique or I'd have a layering fabric. And so when I do that, I would take my needle to the back, and you'll just have to sort of pretend I have an extra layer here. I would do 3 little stitches on top of each other like this, and then I would thread through the layers. So I just thread through the 2 layers of fabric and cut it off for about a 1/2 inch. I do that. If I have nothing, which is mainly what we have on this project, so I'm going to just weave through my existing stitches a little bit like this and then I'm going to do a little knot, which means I'm going to do a loop, come through like that, and finish with a little knot. And then when I cut it off, I'm going to leave a little tail, just like that. So hopefully that will get you started and ending on your threads. Okay, today we're going to work with House of Embroidery thread, and we are very fortunate to work very closely with House of Embroidery in South Africa, which is a fair trade company. It was started in 1995, and it provides employment for previously disadvantaged South Africans. Most of the staff have been with the company from the start, so they have been able to put their children through school and be able to give them a better life. My heart is very attached to South Africa, as most of you know. That is where I was raised and spent my first 30 years of my life. The difference that I love between House of Embroidery and Eleganza is the way it stitches. So we talked about Eleganza the other day, where there's a short 2 to 3 inch variegation, and it is factory dyed, so it's very definite, the changes in color, whereas House of Embroidery is hand dyed, so it has a little bit of a softer appearance, and it comes in the 3 weights, which are all beautiful thread bases. So here we have size 8, and then size 5, and then just recently we have introduced size 3. They come in different colors. When we chose our colors for House of Embroidery, we tried to choose colors that weren't with Eleganza so that you could use both together. Just one little tip that I always tell my students is that each color, so like 12 blossom that you can see up here, has there are 3 colorways in it. So it's either like A, B, or C. So a lot of people don't realize that they want 12 blossom, but they don't realize that there's a 12 blossom A, a 12 blossom B, and a 12 blossom C. We have 140 colors in all 3 weights, and we also have beautiful essential light colored box collections, which are a whole variety of, I think there's 60 colors in each box in a size 5, and we have a size 8 box, which gives you a beautiful variety for doing light work. The other thing I thought I'd talk about is our color coordination, which I talked about with our needles the other day, the green, purple, and turquoise that we do for the different sizes. We also have thread winders like this, and they come in packages of 10 like this. And so anything on a skein, whether it's House of Embroidery or painter's threads, I put them on cards, and the reason I put them on cards is because they're much easier to handle, much easier to travel with, and they keep the threads nice and straight. Sometimes when you wrap a thread around a card, a little card, when you take a thread off, there's little kinks in it every time you wrap. So I always wrap in a circular motion like this. You can see it comes off. It's nice and smooth, very easy to do. And so I wrap it, and then at the end I just tuck the tail down like that. The other product we have are stickers. So we have stickers in the 3 different colors, and our packet actually has all 3 colors in it, so that you can put a green sticker on for size 8, purple for 5, and the turquoise for 3, and it allows you to put the color size, the type of thread, and also the color on the back. So just a very ingenious little way of storing your threads and keeping them nice and wound in order to work with them.